Anderson Cooper was being handcuffed by FBI Media Crimes Unit Special Agent Patricia Walsh, badge MCU 6841, in the lobby of CNN's Manhattan headquarters at 3:22 p.m. on a busy Thursday afternoon, accused of orchestrating the largest news fraud scheme in American media history. The 56-year-old Emmy Award-winning journalist found himself facing charges under the Wire Fraud Act for allegedly creating and distributing $80 million worth of fabricated news stories, manipulating public opinion through systematic disinformation campaigns, and corrupting the fundamental trust between news organizations and the American people. Agent Walsh was convinced that one of America's most trusted news anchors had been using his position at CNN and his reputation for integrity to operate a sophisticated fake news manufacturing operation that influenced everything from stock markets to political elections through carefully crafted propaganda disguised as legitimate journalism. But what Agent Walsh and the FBI Media Crimes Unit didn't know was that Anderson Cooper hadn't created fake news. He had discovered Operation Narrative Control, the most extensive media manipulation network in modern history, where corporate interests and foreign governments were paying hundreds of millions of dollars to plant false stories in mainstream media outlets, and his fraud was actually a 6-month undercover investigation to expose how authentic journalism was being systematically undermined by manufactured propaganda. The investigation had begun 7 months earlier when Anderson Cooper was preparing for a special report on the influence of social media on traditional news reporting. As someone who had built his career on rigorous fact-checking and investigative integrity, Cooper was concerned about the increasing speed with which unverified information was being reported as news, and he wanted to understand how digital platforms were affecting the traditional journalism standards that had guided his profession for decades. During his research, Cooper began noticing unusual patterns in how certain stories were being reported across multiple news outlets simultaneously. Complex international events were being covered with remarkably similar language, identical talking points, and coordinated timing that suggested something more systematic than coincidental reporting. The uniformity was particularly striking because the stories involved topics where independent journalists would typically develop different perspectives and angles based on their own research and sources. Before we dive deeper into this incredible investigation that revealed how our trusted news sources were being manipulated without our knowledge, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell right now. This story exposes the shocking truth about how the news we consume every day might not be as authentic as we think, and you'll want to be immediately notified when we release more content that reveals what's really happening behind the scenes in media. Your subscription helps us continue investigating these crucial stories that affect everyone who consumes news. Now let's see what Anderson Cooper discovered that changed everything. Rather than simply reporting on the apparent coordination in news coverage, Cooper decided to investigate the underlying mechanisms that might be causing this unusual uniformity. Using his extensive network of sources within the media industry, intelligence agencies, and corporate communications, he began tracing the origins of coordinated news stories to understand whether this pattern represented natural market forces or something more deliberate and potentially manipulative. Working with a trusted team that included investigative producer Maria Santos, former CIA media analyst Dr. James Chen, and cybersecurity expert Rebecca Martinez, Cooper began what would become the most comprehensive investigation of news manipulation ever conducted by a working journalist. The operation, which he privately called Project Truth, involved tracking information flows, analyzing story coordination patterns, and following financial connections between news organizations and external influence operations. Dr. Chen's analysis revealed that the coordinated news coverage wasn't accidental. It was the result of sophisticated information campaigns designed to shape public opinion on specific topics. The campaigns used advanced psychological research, artificial intelligence algorithms, and massive financial resources to create and distribute carefully crafted narratives that appeared to be legitimate news reporting but were actually strategic propaganda designed to influence public opinion, stock prices, and political outcomes. What do you think Anderson Cooper found when he started investigating who was behind these coordinated news campaigns? Was this just normal public relations work, or had he discovered something much more dangerous to our democracy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We're always curious to hear what our viewers think about these complex investigations, and your engagement helps us continue bringing you stories that mainstream media won't cover. The breakthrough came when Cooper's team identified the central organization coordinating these media manipulation campaigns, Strategic Communications International, a seemingly legitimate public relations firm that was actually serving as a front for Operation Narrative Control, a massive influence operation funded by a coalition of multinational corporations, foreign governments, and political organizations with combined budgets exceeding $2 billion annually. Strategic Communications International operated through a network of subsidiary companies, shell organizations, and contracted freelancers who specialized in creating authentic-looking news content that advanced specific political, economic, or social agendas. The organization had successfully placed operatives within major news outlets, developed relationships with influential journalists, and created sophisticated systems for coordinating story placement across multiple media platforms simultaneously. Mr. Cooper, what we're documenting here represents the industrialization of propaganda, Maria Santos reported during a secure briefing in Cooper's private office. This isn't traditional public relations or lobbying. This is systematic manipulation of news coverage using techniques that most consumers and even most journalists don't recognize. They're essentially manufacturing reality by controlling the information that people use to understand current events. The investigation revealed that Operation Narrative Control had been operating for over 5 years, successfully influencing coverage of major news events, including international conflicts, economic policy debates, environmental issues, and political campaigns. The organization used sophisticated psychological research to craft messages that would resonate with specific demographic groups, then coordinated their distribution through trusted news sources to maximize credibility and impact. Dr. Chen's deeper analysis revealed the international scope of the manipulation network, with primary funding coming from 3 major sources: Chinese intelligence services seeking to influence American public opinion about trade policies, Russian information warfare units working to undermine confidence in democratic institutions, and a consortium of pharmaceutical companies coordinating to suppress negative coverage of their products while promoting favorable stories about their competitors' safety issues. The foreign government involvement was particularly sophisticated, utilizing cultural consultants and former American intelligence operatives who understood how to craft messages that would appear authentically American while advancing foreign policy objectives. They're not just spreading disinformation, Dr. Chen explained during the team briefing. They're creating entirely fabricated news events, complete with fake sources, manufactured documents, and coordinated expert commentary that makes fictional stories appear completely legitimate. The pharmaceutical component of the operation was equally disturbing, involving the systematic suppression of adverse drug reaction reports, the creation of fake medical studies that supported profitable treatments, and the coordination of positive coverage for expensive medications while undermining confidence in generic alternatives. The financial incentives were enormous. A single successfully placed story could influence stock prices by billions of dollars and affect the health decisions of millions of Americans. Cooper's team discovered that the manipulation network had successfully influenced coverage of at least 40 major news stories over the past 2 years, including international trade negotiations, environmental policy debates, and pharmaceutical safety issues. The stories had been crafted using advanced psychological profiling to maximize emotional impact while minimizing critical thinking, essentially turning news consumption into a form of unconscious manipulation. But the most disturbing aspect of the operation was how it exploited the trust and credibility that legitimate journalists had built with their audiences. By paying news organizations to publish carefully crafted content that appeared to be independent reporting, the manipulators were essentially weaponizing the public's trust in journalism to advance hidden agendas that served corporate and foreign interests rather than the public good. Cooper realized that exposing Operation Narrative Control would require more than traditional investigative reporting, since the organization had developed sophisticated techniques for discrediting whistleblowers and dismissing critical coverage as conspiracy theories or foreign disinformation. He needed to gather irrefutable evidence that would force public acknowledgement of the manipulation while protecting his sources and ensuring that the network couldn't simply rebrand and continue operating. To document the full scope of the media manipulation network, Cooper authorized his team to conduct what amounted to an undercover operation within the journalism industry itself. Using his legitimate access to news organizations and his established relationships with media executives, they began systematically documenting how false stories were created, distributed, and promoted through seemingly independent news sources. The investigation required Cooper's team to employ techniques that blurred the line between legitimate journalism and potentially deceptive practices. They created false identities to infiltrate Strategic Communications International, recorded conversations with media manipulation operatives, and documented financial transactions between influence operations and news organizations. While their intentions were to protect journalistic integrity, their methods created exactly the kind of suspicious activity that would attract attention from federal agencies monitoring media fraud. FBI Media Crimes Unit Special Agent Patricia Walsh was reviewing suspicious financial activity reports when she noticed unusual patterns associated with Anderson Cooper and several major news organizations. The intelligence reports showed coordinated payments between Cooper's production company and organizations that appeared to be involved in systematic disinformation campaigns, along with communication patterns that suggested coordination in placing false stories across multiple media outlets. Agent Rodriguez, we have a significant media fraud situation involving Anderson Cooper, Walsh reported to her supervisor while reviewing the automated financial monitoring alerts. We're seeing coordinated payments to organizations known for disinformation operations, systematic placement of stories across multiple news outlets, and communication patterns that suggest organized manipulation of news coverage. The financial flows suggest this could be an $80 million fraud operation. Agent Walsh's investigation was complicated by Cooper's reputation as one of America's most trusted journalists, but the evidence suggested that he had been using his position at CNN and his credibility with viewers to operate a sophisticated scheme for manufacturing and distributing false news stories. The financial records showed payments to organizations that specialized in creating fake news content, and the communication intercepts suggested coordination with foreign influence operations. The FBI's assessment was that Cooper had either been compromised by foreign intelligence services or had become a domestic threat, using his media platform to manipulate public opinion for financial gain. The evidence appeared comprehensive: systematic creation of false news stories, coordination with known disinformation operations, and financial transactions that suggested profit motives rather than legitimate journalism. The decision to arrest Cooper was made during an emergency briefing of the Department of Justice's Media Integrity Task Force after FBI analysts reported that his influence operations had potentially affected coverage of major political events and economic developments. The potential for widespread public deception was considered so serious that immediate action was required to prevent further damage to democratic discourse. On October 23 at 3:22 p.m., Agent Walsh and her federal task force arrived at CNN's Manhattan headquarters with arrest warrants charging Cooper under the Wire Fraud Act, conspiracy to commit fraud, and violations of federal election laws related to undisclosed influence operations. The timing was chosen to minimize disruption to CNN's news operations, while ensuring that Cooper could be arrested before potentially destroying evidence or fleeing the country. Anderson Hayes Cooper, I'm Special Agent Patricia Walsh with the FBI Media Crimes Unit, she announced as Cooper was preparing for his evening broadcast in CNN's newsroom. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, systematic distribution of false information, and operation of an unlicensed influence campaign. These charges carry potential sentences of up to 30 years in federal prison. Cooper's reaction was immediate concern for the implications of his arrest on public trust in journalism rather than personal worry about his legal situation. Agent Walsh, you're making a catastrophic mistake, he said as federal agents applied restraints while CNN staff and cameras documented the unprecedented arrest of a major news anchor. I haven't been creating fake news. I've been investigating the largest media manipulation operation in American history. My arrest is helping the real criminals by stopping an investigation that was about to expose systematic corruption of our news media. But Agent Walsh was convinced she was dealing with someone whose trusted position in media had enabled him to become a serious threat to democratic discourse and public trust. Mr. Cooper, we have extensive evidence of your coordination with disinformation operations, systematic placement of false stories across multiple news outlets, and financial transactions totaling $80 million connected to media manipulation campaigns. Your claims about investigating fraud are not supported by any legitimate oversight of your activities. As news of Cooper's arrest spread through social media and news networks, the reaction was immediate and deeply polarized. Many viewers refused to believe that one of America's most trusted journalists could be involved in creating fake news, while others saw the arrest as confirmation of their suspicions about mainstream media manipulation and bias in news coverage. But while media attention focused on the shocking arrest of one of television's most respected news anchors, Cooper's legal team and the Project Truth investigators made a decision that would ultimately vindicate him and expose one of the most significant threats to press freedom in American history. They released comprehensive documentation of Operation Narrative Control, including evidence that showed Cooper had been working to protect journalistic integrity rather than undermine it. The evidence that Cooper's team had assembled was staggering in its scope and professional quality. Financial records showed exactly how media manipulation operations functioned. Recorded conversations documented systematic corruption of news coverage, and network analysis revealed the extent to which foreign and corporate interests had infiltrated American news organizations to advance hidden agendas. Agent Walsh found herself reviewing evidence that completely contradicted her assumptions about Cooper's media fraud activities. Instead of operating a fake news network, the documentation showed the most sophisticated investigation of news manipulation ever conducted by a working journalist, with evidence quality that exceeded what most federal agencies could achieve with traditional methods. Within 72 hours of Cooper's arrest, federal prosecutors were reviewing not just the evidence against him, but the evidence he had assembled documenting systematic manipulation of American news coverage by foreign governments, multinational corporations, and political organizations. What they found was comprehensive proof that the information environment that Americans used to make democratic decisions was being systematically corrupted by well-funded influence operations. Media law experts who reviewed Cooper's documentation concluded that Operation Narrative Control represented the most serious threat to press freedom and democratic discourse since the advent of television news. The manipulation network had been operating without regulatory oversight, public awareness, or industry accountability, essentially turning trusted news sources into propaganda distribution systems that served hidden interests rather than public information needs. Cooper was released from custody with all charges dropped and formal apologies from the Department of Justice for the mistake that had nearly criminalized one of the most important investigations in journalism history. But more importantly, his work led to congressional hearings, regulatory reforms, and new transparency requirements for news organizations that helped restore public trust in legitimate journalism while exposing systematic manipulation of media coverage. The exposure of Operation Narrative Control sent shockwaves through the media industry and led to comprehensive reforms in how news organizations verify information, disclose financial relationships, and maintain editorial independence. The investigation revealed that dozens of major news stories had been artificially created or manipulated to serve corporate and foreign interests, rather than informing the public about actual events. 6 months after his arrest, Anderson Cooper received the George Polk Award for Investigative Journalism and the Edward R. Murrow Award for Excellence in Journalism for his role in exposing media manipulation and protecting the integrity of news reporting. The case established new legal precedents for protecting investigative journalism while creating enforceable standards for transparency in news operations. We want to hear from you. How do you determine whether news stories are authentic or potentially manipulated? Anderson Cooper's investigation shows how even trusted journalists can be wrongly accused when they're working to protect the integrity of information that we all depend on. Share your thoughts about media manipulation and how we can better identify reliable news sources in the comments below, and let us know what you think about the responsibility of journalists to expose threats to press freedom. Your engagement helps us continue bringing you stories that reveal the truth about media and democracy, so don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content that investigates the forces shaping our information environment.